If you look up the work of Netherlandic painter Hieronymus Bosch, you'll come across a painting from around 1502 titled The Conjurer. There are 5 known paint versions and 1 engraving of it, but they are essentially the same scene. The primary focus is one of a street performer, a magician, standing behind a wooden table performing for a small but entranced throng of people, to include villagers, clergy, and even a nun. On the table, there are a few items: a wand, 2 metal cups, 3 small balls, a mouth-down cone, obviously meant for concealment. A small frog sits on the table, and a small dog sits in repose behind the table as if ready for a routine, and the performer has a wicker basket hanging from his belt, inside of which we see an owl. The scene, as presented, is meant to let the viewer into both sides of the cultural window. If you look closely at the performer's left hand, he has something in it, while he draws attention to the object in the right hand. At the front of the table, a young boy, seemingly blind, strains to hear what is going on, although in the engraving he appears to not be blind, but looking into a gap in the tunic of the man next to him. Ultimately, the scenes do unify around one theme, that of distraction. In all scenes, pickpockets are at work, and people are looking in different places and for different reasons. Depending on who looks at a painting like this, you'll get a myriad of responses about the artwork. And in my world, one in which sleight of hand has been a driving factor in my life, there is only one main object of concern, and that is the cups and balls. A timeless act so embedded in the human experience that it is the very oasis around which this cultural snapshot is gathered. Today, we will take a brief journey through the significance of this amazing and timeless routine on box number 7. If you go and purchase any children's magic set today, it will have a varying selection of items. The good ones will have classic effects in them, although most are not recognized as such because of the very cheap and unserious props contained therein. Now, without fail, these sets will have one thing, though, on a consistent level almost every time: a set of small plastic cups, one of them red, one blue, and one yellow. Along with that will be a set of small balls, sometimes made of compressed styrofoam, sometimes made of pom-pom material, and sometimes made of rubber. If one takes the time to read the tiny paper instructions, and assuming one has zero knowledge of sleight of hand, they will discover a secret principle that can be applied through the entire art form, and when employed correctly can even fool a seasoned performer, especially when used in a context they are not accustomed to. And while the props may be cheap, it is an incontrovertible fact that the very act of methodically and dramatically placing these items on a table seems to invoke a shared human experience, because people start to take notice. What causes this? Is it the age of the trick? Well, I can tell you this much: it's a common factor in the magician's performing script to mention that this is the oldest recorded trick in the entire art. In fact, so much so that performers tend to castigate the work of others for dragging such a cliche into their work. The problem is the cliche is only a cliche to people regularly exposed to it, like us. But the lay public, people that rarely see it performed in their own lives, are always fascinated by such a pronouncement. And indeed, it has very old reference points. The late actor and magician Ricky Jay performed an amazing historical rundown in his 1990s era off-Broadway show called Ricky Jay and His 52 Assistants. It was called The History Lesson, and in that routine alone, he references Reginald Scott's Discovery expose from 1584, where the concept of placing a ball under a candlestick is discussed as part of the performing process. Seneca made reference to the cup and die trick in his writings on morality around 37 AD, stating that knowing the secret would diminish his interest in how it is performed. Another book written by an author under the pseudonym Hocus Pocus Jr. wrote The Anatomy of Legerdemain in 1634 and details a complete routine step by step to include diagrams, ball placement, vanishes and reappearances, and a sequence used to this day in another context called 2 in the hand and 1 in the pocket. There were 13 editions of that book, culminating in the final edition in 1691. A number of 15th century woodcuts show cups and balls performers, including one simply titled The Magician, showing a street performer engaging the royalty in 1470. Alciphron of Athens, a Greek rhetorician, wrote a set of fictitious letters designed to snapshot a cross-section of Athenian society, rich and poor alike. One of his letters is written by a farmer who gives us this look at the 4th century in Greece. This letter is written presumably from Nepeus to Cranaeades. You remember I loaded my donkey with figs and fruitcakes. Well, I put my donkey up until such time as I could sell my wares to one of my customers, and then a fellow took me and carried me off to the theater, where he gave me a good seat and entertained me by various shows. Most of the shows I don't recall, for I'm a poor hand at remembering and telling such things, but I can tell you that one thing I saw that made me almost speechless with astonishment. A man came forward and, setting down a 3-legged table, placed 3 little cups on it. Then under these cups he hid some little round white pebbles, such as we find on the banks of rapid streams. At one moment he would hide them under each cup, and at another moment, I don't know how, he would show them all under a single cup. And then again he would make them entirely disappear from under the cups and exhibit them between his lips. Then he would swallow them, and, drawing forward 4 spectators who stood near him, he would take 1 pebble from a man's nose, another from a man's ear, and a third from a man's head, and after picking them up, he would make them disappear from sight again. A very light-fingered gentleman. Eurybates, the Ocalatian, whom we hear tell wasn't in his class. I hope no creature like him ever gets onto my farm. No one would ever catch him, and he would steal everything in the house and make off with all the goods in the place. I would say that's a 4th century euphemism for check your wallets if that guy comes around. And lastly, there is a claim by some that the tomb of King Bakay III at Beni Hassan in the Valley of the Kings depicts Nile magicians performing the effect, but that proof is kind of weak. We are treated to 2 individuals on the hieroglyphics sitting across from each other, appearing to play a game involving cups or bowls or baskets or whatever, with an inscription translated one on top of the other. But either way, the trick has been in the annals of the human existence forever, and has it been prevalent so long that our human DNA has an experiential memory of sorts, something known as collective consciousness? I don't know. Perhaps it's the power of the number 3. 3 is the number of completion. Elements with 3 phases feel complete. Compositions with a verse, bridge, and a chorus are a good template for fulfilling a songwriting obligation. The sum total of our being is stated as body, soul, and spirit. A logical proposition at the collegiate level requires a major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion. Now, I'm sure you can think of your own examples as well. In fact, most sleight of hand routines have 3 phases, since 2 feels somewhat incomplete and 4 somehow caters to feelings of overkill. And so, even after centuries gone by, the routine generally commences with 3 cups and 3 balls. The routine has had many practitioners over the centuries, notably Harry Houdini, while not exactly hitching his fame to the performance of that trick, did proclaim it to be a rite of passage for anyone wanting to bear the moniker of magician in the professional arena. It would be a contemporary of Houdini, however, that would define for literal generations what is considered to be the granddaddy of modern routines. This would be none other than Canadian magician Dai Vernon, a man who would come to reside in, perform at, and become a reigning and honorary professor emeritus at Hollywood's Magic Castle. His contributions to the art are immeasurably huge, and he is responsible for some of the greatest classics ever produced in the 20th century. His routine is simply known today in the trade as the Vernon routine, and mentioning it within the circle of performers immediately instills in the mind the phases I am about to describe, which will very much be close to 4th century Athens and Alciphron's account. The wonderful thing about it is you will be able to see all the phases in your head as I describe them. It should be noted that Vernon's routine has essentially become ground zero template for almost all modern cups and balls performers. The pros may vary in terms of the kind of cups used and the balls employed and the way they end routines, but the routine itself is essentially this. 3 cups are introduced, possibly examined by an audience member within reach. Vernon used to hand them out and tell audience members to look at the cups and make sure they are free of guile. But anyhow, the cups are then placed mouth down on the table, side by side, in a straight line. 3 balls are now brought out. Now, the mode and manner is up to the performer. Sometimes the balls are dumped out of the cups at the beginning, and sometimes they are made to appear in a skillful fashion, either one at a time or all at once. But ultimately, they are placed on top of each mouth-down cup. Each ball is picked up one at a time and made to vanish. When the last ball has vanished, the performer tips the cups back to show they have reappeared, one under each cup. That's phase 1. The next phase involves leaving a ball under the cup and calling upon under each cup and calling an audience member to point to either outside cup. So someone would say perhaps the ball on the left, and the performer would then cause the ball next to it, which is the middle cup, to vanish and reappear under the cup indicated by the spectator. This is then repeated for the other side to show that it could have been done with impunity no matter what the spectator chose. The third and seemingly last phase is even more simple conceptually. Each ball now sits outside their respective cup, but in front of the cup. The performer scoops each ball under each cup one at a time, very much in a modular and broken sense, only to have them to be shown immediately that they have gathered under the middle cup. Now, in the law of threes, the routine feels like a complete demonstration, and you theoretically can end there and walk away and take your applause. But this is where a 4th phase comes in, but not as a phase of the routine, but as a demonstrative afterthought, kind of a, we're stepping off stage, let me show you something kind of cool in Magic World. A ball is placed again under each cup. The performer begins to remove one at a time from under each cup and place them in his pocket. By the time he has removed the last one, he shows that one has returned at the other end inexplicably. He seems puzzled, or at least he asks the audience why they're puzzled, and an explanation is offered. One that demonstrates an old concept of sleight of hand to, quote, explain the logic, unquote, which, if done well, does seem to have a distinct inside baseball flavor to it. But none of that technique explains one last dodge, that all 3 balls return under the center cup one more time, giving the performer, well, more street cred than they initially claimed and more than the audience assumed that they had. The balls are casually put away, and the performer asks the audience about the plausibility of them returning under the cups yet again. At this point, the cups are all lifted, and 3 lemons, limes, or anything of a gargantuan size and impossible to explain but still fit under the cups manages to be sitting under each cup. Now, I could list 100 performers essentially use this framework or variations of it, including myself. So the real developments aren't so much the order of the phases, but the changes that can be applied to make the mysterious even more so. Most notably, in modern days, is Pittsburgh magician Paul Gertner, who is a longtime casual acquaintance of mine, but more notably, he was a friend of Johnny Carson, and he appeared also on both The Tonight Show and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. His cups and balls routine is a modern classic. The legendary routine, although none really dare to do it besides him, but because he takes regular balls and he exchanged them for steel ball bearings using his Pittsburgh roots and making of steel as the background rationale. So not only are you confronted with visuals, you now have an element of sound to contend with. As a ball is placed under a cup, the cup is shaken to allow you to hear the ball bearing is under there. When it's suddenly gone, the vanish is even that much more astonishing. For the most part, his routine is very much like Vernon's with a few differences. I won't go into here, but rest assured his routine ends with a huge production of heavy ball bearings, giant ones under the cup, somehow placed under the metal cups, and then ultimately one is produced that is so big that it won't fit back inside the cup at the end of the routine. I will include a link to his performance, possibly the Penn and Teller performance, in the show notes. There are other variations. There are 2-cup routines, most notably by comedic magician David Williamson, whose zany and seemingly extemporaneous form of chaos belies the fact that he has some of the greatest skills in all of sleight of hand. And then there's the late Tommy Wonder from the Netherlands. I figure since we started in the Netherlands, we will end in the Netherlands. His 2-cup routine literally involved objects on the table intermittently appearing under the cups, placed there right under the nose of the spectators. He released this trick to the magic market, and 20 years ago, I learned it. I used it in restaurant work for a short time when I realized it didn't have my DNA in it, and it felt forced. So I was essentially playing a cover tune of someone else's song, so I dispensed with the routine. Ultimately, I absorbed the astonishing psychological principles and applied them to my own routine. And I now have a routine that explains the Christmas morning that I woke up as a kid and opened my first magic set that had cups. It's an emotional walk down memory lane with verse and references, and it's all mine. And I happen to think it has the potential to be one of the ones remembered for a long time if I ever get to expose it beyond my own stage work. Any magicians listening will immediately know I have prejudiced many routines at the expense of others. Penn and Teller's 2-man routine using cheap plastic cups and balls made of foil, Johnny Ace Palmer's production of baby live chickens at the end, and even David Regal's routine where he starts with kid cups as an intro, puts them away, brings out some metal cups, and then has the plastic cups reappear as a magical transport to his childhood under the metal cups, and then lift the child cups, and the balls from childhood are under those. The variations are infinite, the routine is ancient, and the magical journey of childhood is still contained within the potential of any performer who delivers the tale effectively. It just needs to be treated with the respect and attention it deserves. I mean, it's old enough, and it's older than you. Be kind to your elders. This is box number 7.